Welcome to episode 196 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyer, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer, director, actor, producer, and even editor Griff Furst. He recently did a film called Cold Moon, and we talked through that process. It was based on a book which Griff optioned, then wrote the screenplay for, then raised the money for the film. So we talked through every aspect of how this film came to be. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 196. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline inquiry letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Quick few words about what I'm working on. A quick update on The Pinch, the crime action thriller feature film that I'm finishing up on. All the special effects shots are in and have been colored, and I got the drive, the hard drive with all of the files, the special effects files as well as the main file for the film. Got that back from my colorist last week, so all the color correction is officially done. And I took that hard drive over to my editor with all the effect shots, obviously the colored version of the film, all the closing credits, the opening credits, closing credits, got that to the editor. So he's just basically piecing the film back together, all the video elements. And then I'm still waiting on sound, but that is moving ahead nicely as well. My dialogue editor is almost done with his part. And at this point, it's really more than just dialogue editing that he's doing. He's filling in any audio holes and making sure everything works together. So there's a number of just technical things that he's doing for me just to get everything up to speed. And then the final step, once he's done, hopefully in a week or two, that piece will be done. And then the final step with the audio is mixing down the sound. So I have a mixer ready to go. He's going to take the sound design, the score, and what my dialogue editor presents, and then he's just going to mix everything together, make sure the levels are all properly, it's all leveled off, and then he will produce all the different tracks, the audio tracks. I'll bring those back to the editor. By that time, hopefully my editor will be done with the video portion, and then he will just drop in the audio portion of the film, and then basically we'll be done. And then it's just a matter of just outputting the films and start sending it to distributors. So, slowly but surely it is moving along. I did a webinar last month called The Pinch, Producing a Micro-Budget Feature Film, where I go into great detail on how exactly I wrote, directed, and produced this micro-budget film. Specifically, I talk about how to write a micro-budget screenplay, how to raise money to shoot your micro-budget screenplay, which includes a lot of information about how to run a successful Kickstarter campaign, which I did for The Pinch. And then I also dig into pre-production, production, and of course post-production. The webinar is over 3 hours long, so there's a ton of very practical information in it. I worked hard putting this webinar together, so I am charging a small fee for it. But if you're looking to write, direct, and or produce a micro-budget film, I think this could really help you out. There are a ton of directors and producers out there looking for the next great micro-budget script. So even if you're just a writer who's looking to understand this market better, I think this webinar would be very valuable for you as well, even if you don't necessarily want to be a producer on your own projects. I think writing scripts that can be shot on a micro budget level is a great way to meet up and coming directors and producers and get some of your written work produced. You can find this webinar at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/thepinch, and The Pinch is all one word, all lowercase, so it's just sellingyourscreenplay.com/THEPINCH. I will of course link to it in the show notes as well, so you can get that there. But if this sounds like something that might be interesting for you, please do check it out. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing screenwriter and director Griff Furst. Here is the interview. Welcome, Griff, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ashley. It's good to be here.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a little bit, just tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get into the entertainment industry?
So I grew up in Los Angeles, and I have been around the entertainment industry for as long as I can remember because my father was in the business, so I would be going to set with him since I was a really little kid. I actually have some pictures in my office sitting on his lap in the director's chair. But I wasn't, he was pretty famous in the 80s, and at the time, I had actually had some offers to act alongside him as his son in some pretty successful sitcoms and such. But I had a little bit of stage fright. I knew I wanted to be an actor as an adult when I was a kid, but I didn't want to be a child actor. I was more into sports and friends and school and that stuff. So I didn't start working in the industry till I was about 17. I just graduated high school. My father was directing a movie. He put me in a little small part. And then after that, I was just auditioning and studying and all that jazz. And I only acted for about 8 years. I was just an actor. And then a company called the Asylum, which you may be familiar with, they cast me in a movie. I was acting in the movie for them, and the executive producer was on set, and he said, "How would you like to direct one of these things?" I was 24 years old or something like that. So I said, "Sure." Even though I really hadn't considered directing, but I knew how to do it because I grew up on set and I studied scene study and all that stuff. So I directed one of those. It did well for them. I directed several more, and then other people started asking me to direct. I directed some shorts that got into some festivals, and then just started this kind of path in the TV movie world. And it just, well, I didn't pursue it. It kind of just found me. I was just getting one TV movie after another, and I started to think that I do love doing the TV movies because they're a quick turnaround. You get to make a lot of content. And you still get to create your artistic vision. But of course, when I started, I wanted to tell the stories that I wanted to tell. So I started making movies. So I reined it in a bit, and I started pursuing property I was interested in, Cold Moon being one of those properties, and acquired the rights to that novel. It was a story that I really loved, and just kind of got back on that track. And I still do a lot of TV movies because it's a huge market, and I really enjoy it, and I'm good at it. But I also have this pile of intellectual property that I just love, like Cold Moon. Mm-hmm. So that's the very, very short version. But it was all just, it's like any producer. There's not kind of one method to be a producer. You don't go get a degree for being a producer and all of a sudden you're a producer. It's like all the producers I know, they do very different things, and they found their way to where they are in a very different way. So my way was almost fate, and so here we are.
And so when did you transition to start writing? When you directed this first film for the Asylum, did you also write that?
I always loved writing, and in school I didn't have much interest in traditional schooling, although I was okay at it. But I always got A pluses in English because I love literature. I always read a lot, even when I was a kid, and I always studied. I mean, I've been reading screenplays since, again, before I can remember. So. And I studied the hell out of writing. Every book on screenwriting I've definitely consumed, and I have my favorites. So I've been writing since before I was directing, just out of a hobby. Yeah, I'd submit them to a few people and try to sell them. But as I read more and more and understood the craft more and more, I just started writing and realized that I'm pretty damn good at it just because I've taken the time to understand it, to understand how to tell a story in the proper structure and an emotionally impactful way. Mm-hmm. So I never embarked upon being a writer, but I really enjoy doing it, and it's almost easier for me to create something that I want to do from scratch than to go out and try to find it on the blacklist. Or, although I'll do that too, but I just love writing. I'm working on 3 different screenplays right now.
Huh, nice. Now I noticed too with Cold Moon and several of your other projects, not only did you write, direct, and produce, but you also edited. When did you pick up these skills for editing? Was that just self-taught again, just going along, you just started doing some editing?
Self-taught, yeah, self-taught. My brother gave me a 2001 iMac, I think, that crashed every other move. So I think it took me about 6 months to edit like a 20-minute short film. Okay. But I was pretty proficient after that. I've since moved on to Avid and Premiere. But it is all self-taught, and I've noticed over working with many editors, so much of it is just kind of your own natural intuition. So anybody can teach themselves how to use software. It's not that complicated. Some of the more technical online stuff is. But I just seem to have a really solid intuition for pacing and performance, and I actually don't like cutting my own stuff, and I've been trying to discipline myself not to edit my own stuff. But on Cold Moon, it was a limited budget, so I wanted to spend a long time in post, which we did. We spent almost a year in post, so I didn't want to pay somebody for a year to edit that movie. So I just stayed with it. But my last three, I had a very talented editor with me because they weren't year-long post kind of movies.
Okay. Perfect, perfect. So maybe we can dig in now to Cold Moon. This is your latest writing, directing, producing, and editing project. Maybe to start out, you can just talk about the premise for it. What is sort of the log line or the pitch for this film?
So the log line is a tale of supernatural vengeance, and that is pretty much what it is. You know, there's this odd crime that happens in a small town, and there's debate over who might have caused it. And it reminds the novel and then the screenplay reminded me a little bit of Psycho, because it is, if you look at it, it is almost a perfect screenplay structure, but it's very unconventional because it's a wide-done-it movie. It kind of starts off as, and we find out who did it. We find out who did it about halfway through the movie, and then there's this eventual decline of the lead antagonist, and we're trying to decipher whether what is happening in the real world, even if it is supernatural, or if it's all just happening in this tormented man's mind. So it's really a haunting story, but different from kind of the Conjuring, Annabelle, what Blumhouse is doing, because it's really focusing on the downward spiral of a town and an individual, as opposed to a haunted house setting where the house is haunted and you have to get out, but you can't get out. It's not like that, but it's a kindred spirit, I guess.
Yeah. So this is a book that you read that you liked, and then you said you optioned it from the author. Maybe you can talk about that process a lot. I get people emailing me quite often saying, "Oh, I read this book, I really love it. How do you recommend that I go and actually get the movie rights to this?" So maybe you can just talk a little bit to how you found the book, and then ultimately how you tracked down the author and were able to option the movie rights.
Absolutely. I love this topic because it transcends screenwriting and anything else that we do. Because I just do it. I'm an entrepreneur as well. So it's like if I have an idea, you just do it. I have friends who are screenwriters who've been working on the same screenplay for 10 years. And it's like, dude, just write the fucking screenplay. I don't know if I can cuss here. So I was, if I see something and I have an inclination that it's something that I want to do, that I want to be involved in, I just go after it until I get yes or no. And depending on how bad I want it, if I get no, I'll keep going. But in this particular instance, I was watching Beetlejuice, and I hadn't seen it in probably 10 years. And I loved the movie so much. I loved it when I was a kid. I loved it when I rewatched it. It was just such a unique story. So I looked at the writers, and I saw that one of them was a gentleman named Michael McDowell. Looked him up. He also wrote Nightmare Before Christmas and some Tales from the Dark Side and just some really cool stuff, but didn't blow up to the level of like Stephen King. So I researched him and found out that he had written, I'd say about 20 novels that were pretty beloved in the 80s and were well known then, but he just didn't get to the it and Misery level of Stephen King. But he was almost on par with him in the 80s. They were actually good friends, and a lot of the masters of horror knew and know Michael, who's dead now. Anyhow, so I researched him. I ordered a bunch of his novels just to see what they were like, and I started reading them one by one. I took down all of them. They were all fantastic. They were just so well written. And so I called the rights holder, and I negotiated a price. I said, I really love this material. I really love what Michael did. I read I came in prepared. I read all his literature. So I knew everything about it, which the rights holder appreciated, that I had such an affinity for her late client. But anyhow, and I chose a couple of them that I actually optioned, and I decided to start with Cold Moon. I just thought that was the most ready for the format for feature. Yeah. It felt like a screenplay.
Okay. And so maybe give us some specifics. You said you tracked down the rights holder. What exactly does that mean? It's like you're looking in the back of the book for the publisher, Googling the publisher, going that route. How exactly did you track down the rights holder?
Yeah, so I've purchased and found a lot of really interesting intellectual property over the years, and it's always a little bit different. I think in this case, I just read about the author and read about him, anything I could find online. Uh, and then I think it was on Wikipedia or something like that. I saw that his partner, it was named Lawrence Selnick, and he was a teacher at Boston University. So I went on the Boston University website. I found Lawrence's contact. I sent him an email. He's very sweet and engaged with me and said, you should talk to this person who's actually the agent still and represents the rights, a smaller boutique agency, woman who's ended up becoming a pretty close friend of mine because we're working together a lot. And I called her, and that's it. And then I had my lawyers draft up a option purchase agreement, and that was in October, and we were shooting by December, I think.
Okay. And maybe you could just give us some even just ballpark, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like specifics about this deal, but just sort of general ballpark figures of what this looks like. How much do you pay for something like this, and just how long are you able to get the movie rights? Like if you don't make the movie, do you lose the rights at some point? Just some sort of specifics to the contract so people kind of have an idea of what they're getting into if they want to pursue this.
For sure. Well, I mean, you can really do anything you want to be. There's no rules, I don't think, with contracts, but I know as far as what's customary, well, it really depends on the level of the property that you want to get. If it's a self-published thing, it's not a very well-known novel, then you may not have to pay anything for the rights. I've optioned something for $1, and I've optioned something for $3,500, and then I purchased something for $5,000, and I purchased something for $500,000. As far as the option purchase agreement, but generally you find the material, you see, what level it's at, how much attention it's getting. Obviously, if it's a hot New York Times #1 bestseller novel, you have to come in with some heat if you want to actually secure that. But if it's your friend's book that you found, or if it's just a book that's great that's kind of forgotten about, you can probably get a really good deal on it. So you just kind of have to use your own common sense to gauge what the value of that property is, and then what's customary is you just fill out an agreement, and your option can be anywhere from 3 months. The shortest option I've done is 3 months. The longest one I've done is 21 months. And you pick a purchase price for that length of time that you have the option to purchase the script. And then in that same contract, there will be a purchase price. So, you option it for $1,000, and if sometime within the next 18 months you decide that you want to make it, you then owe the writer $100,000 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And that's how you structure it. And again, depending on the level of the literature and how much attention it has, you might be able to buy the rights to make the movie for $5,000, or sometimes it's going to cost you $500,000 if it's a New York Times #1 bestseller or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into your.
And writing. Also the author, right? Also the authors. Sorry, because I like this subject because I've dealt with different authors, and some authors actually have more popular books and they'll license them for cheaper because they love filmmakers. Then you have other authors like Dean Koontz, who doesn't like filmmakers. He doesn't think that they do his books justice. So it's like, if you want to get one of his books, he's going to charge you an arm and a leg because he just doesn't necessarily love the medium. I mean, he has interviews where he just talks smack about screenplays and everything. It's like, all right, well, fuck it. So you're going to have to pay a lot more for his because he doesn't even want you to make it. But Stephen King is very friendly. It's like he'll give a student, I think, $1 option, if they want to make one of his short films.
Short stories, and film, sure, yeah. So let's dig into Cold Moon and your writing process a little bit. Maybe you can just talk about what your day looks like when you get into the point where you're starting to write. How much time do you spend outlining, and maybe even talk specifically about this as an adaptation? Did you read through the book and then make like a bunch of notes for an outline? Was the book sort of your outline? And then how much time do you spend actually opening final draft and actually writing the script pages?
Well, this one, I typically like to collaborate, and I collaborated with a gentleman named Jack Snyder on this one. But part of the reason I like Cold Moon is not only because it was ready to be turned into a screenplay, but it so much resembled a screenplay. There was a lot of dialogue, a lot of really great dialogue written into the novel, which was attracted to me. It was written in a 3-act structure, even though it was a 310-page novel. So a lot of it for me, which is why I have Michael actually, even though he's deceased, he's credited as a writer on the screenplay, because I really felt that was the right thing to do, because I just edited it well. Pretty much everything in the script is just an abridged version of what the novel was. But I'm writing a few other things right now, and typically what I do is I research and research and research and research whatever the subject is that I'm doing until I feel like I'm full of information. And then I throw it down into an outline format. I'll beat out Act 1, 2, and 3 until I feel like that's a really really nice story, and then I'll jump into the screenplay. And I've tried different things. I know some people suggest to set out time and turn off your phone, but I'm more of kind of a binge guy. So it's like if I take on a project, I just binge. I'll do 20 hours straight writing. Maybe I only get 20 pages done, but I'll get it done a lot faster. I prefer that than, I'm going to write the screenplay over the next 6 months. I prefer I'm going to write the screenplay this month, and I'm going to do whatever it takes and to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what does your development process look like once you have that first draft? Number one, how do you know it's time to show to people? And then who do you show it to? Do you have a network of producers that you work with? Do you have a network of other writers? What does that look like? And then ultimately, what do you do with these notes that you get back from people?
Yeah, I have a few trusted people, writers that I really respect, directors that I respect. I've been kind of leaning on my brother recently, even though he's not a writer. He's a composer, but he has really great sensibilities, and he's not looking at it from a technical standpoint or even from an educated about screenwriting standpoint, but he just inherently knows, because like me, he's been around it his whole life for 40 years. So he inherently kind of has some ideas that work. And I just go to writers. I have a friend who teaches at University of Missouri, teaches screenwriting, so I send it to him. He's really good at structural stuff. I have another writer who's fantastic at dialogue, and so I send it to him. So I pick people who I think the story fits their sensibilities, and I either have them take a look at it and tell me what they think, or I'll send them the final draft, and I'll throw them a couple bucks, and I'll say, hey, will you do an additional dialogue polish on this thing? Or hey, can you look at have a guy who's really good at taking screen direction and making it more concise, losing adjectives and consolidating words, and I'll say, hey, can I give you a few bucks to take down the screen direction because it's a little long-winded and stuff like that. And so I usually just pick people and have them do that and then shoot it back to me.
Okay. So you won't necessarily get a bunch of notes and then go and try and implement those notes yourself, it sounds like.
Well, if in that process, because whether somebody's doing dialogue or looking at screenplay, they typically also give me notes about what they liked or didn't like about the project. And if the same note comes up twice, then I know I have a problem. But I usually send to a good amount of people. By the time I'm ready to start sending it to agents and actors, I'd say at least 7 people have looked at it. Mm-hmm. And consistently, if I'm getting the same note, I will go back and fix that problem. But sometimes I just get different notes, and some of it's taste, and some of it gets fixed when my script doctors do their polish and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So with this particular movie, Cold Moon, I'm curious if you went into it. It comes across as kind of a supernatural thriller, and that seems like a genre that is marketable. How much of that played into your decision to, when you're reading all these books that this fellow has written, you decided, this one could be a movie that I think I could get financed, that I think could ultimately find an audience?
Well, I think that all of Michael's material is marketable, but funny enough, when we started raising money for this project, because this movie was shot with private equity, we actually funded a different movie. We funded a movie that was a crime thriller. And it was like kind of an indie, artful drama, and I absolutely loved that screenplay. But we got to a point where we weren't getting the level of star that we wanted attached. Because it was more of a drama, we needed an A-list actor. We were having a hard time attaching an A-list actor with the value that we needed. So we made a decision very far into the funding process to switch the project we were funding from that one to Cold Moon, because Cold Moon was just a genre that people will go see. Just like what's happening now with horror. It's like horror is one of the only things that's performing at the box office. I think people like to be in that theatrical environment to see a scary movie, and drama on television is so damn good that it's hard to get people these days to pay to go buy a ticket or to rent a drama, no matter how good it is. Even for big actors, it's like I'm surprised that Darren Aronofsky's mother isn't tracking better, because it is a horror film. But anyhow, I'm getting off subject here.
No, I'm excited about that one too. So yeah.
Yeah. So. It absolutely came into it. It's a genre kind of with a built-in audience. It's also one of my favorite genres. I'm a huge horror fan. I have had an extensive VHS collection from when I was like 8 years old. I started watching Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. I was just such a huge fan of every horror movie ever made. So it's like, it's my genre. I love it. And I know that the fans are really loyal and they're going to love it too. So that's why I chose to go that direction, because it was just a little scary to me to make a drama unless I had Margot Robbie attached to it or something, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk then about that next step. You're done with the script. You start going out there, and it sounds like this is a little bit of a pivot where you were already in the process of raising money for another project. But maybe you can just talk about that process of raising money. I get a lot of screenwriters coming to me, hey, I want to produce my own material. How can I raise money? And I know there's no magic bullets or anything, but I'd just be curious to kind of hear about your process of what that is, how you find people to pitch to, and ultimately what your pitch looks like to them.
Sure. Well, in this particular instance, I think is more relevant because I also do a lot of work that's pre-sold, and that's a much different scenario because I have a contract that is essentially worth money, and I just don't get that money until I deliver the movie. So in those cases, which is not Cold Moon, it's very simple. You just go to somebody who has the money, and you say, I'll give you interest on your money. I just need you to loan it to me until I turn in this movie, and then I can cash in this piece of paper kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But in the case of Cold Moon, which is, I think, more common for independent filmmakers to take, where there is no pre-sales and you're making something because you love the story and it's a story that you want to tell, it really boils down to one thing, and it's just superhuman effort. That's all it takes. And anybody I know, it's a lot of people I know that have done it. That's all it is. It's a superhuman, unrelenting dedication to making it happen. Mm-hmm. And so when we started raising money for this one, because we didn't have any contracts, it was extremely difficult. Because you're asking everybody to take a big risk with their money. You know, there's no guarantee they're going to make their money back. Movies are risky. So the filmmakers behind the project, first of all, the material better be great because they're going to read it, I'm sure. And you better be passionate about the piece, which I am, and the gentleman who was raising money with me, we both were very much. And it was a long, brutal process, but just never giving up. I mean, all day, every day for a year, we just called everyone and anyone and checked back in with them, and 99% of it was a waste of time. And you know it's going to be a waste of time, but you find that 1% that makes it happen for you.
Yeah. And so are those just contacts that you had in your Rolodex? Is it friends of friends? Maybe give us some actual specifics of what that actually looks like. I mean, on Facebook, are you pitching people? I had a guy last week I interviewed, and he was literally pitching people on Facebook that he may or may not have even known.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally anything that you can think of. I mean, I was, I would just go through my phone. I have 1,500 contacts on my phone. And anybody who's on there that I thought may even have a lead, I would just reach out to them. And it's like, I get the same thing even from big agencies and managers every day. It's like, I'll get an email, hey, I have these 3 really impressive actors. I have this screenplay. I need $500,000. So it comes both ways. People looking for money against the property that doesn't have the pre-sales, because I hear about it, like I said, like every day. It's like I'll get an email from the same thing. It's like, hey, I have a $2 million movie. I have $1.5 million in contracts, so I'm good. I have $1.5 million, but I need an extra $500,000 that's not secured by anything except hopes that this gets into Sundance. Mm-hmm. So it goes both ways, and that was a lot of what it was. It's literally just Rolodex and talking to people, calling people. I called everybody. I didn't call people that I thought were high net individuals. I was calling, old friends of mine. Just, hey, do you have any ideas? And sometimes they did. They'd be like, you know what? I just met this guy in Valencia, and he wanted to finance my friend's project, but that fell through. Why don't you meet with him, or whatever it is? Yeah. We meet, and it was likely going to be a huge waste of time, which most of the time it was. But that's kind of the price you have to pay when you're starting out. I don't have to do that anymore, thank God, because I have my Rolodex of people that want to invest. So I don't have to look for investors anymore, because that was the beauty of it. It's like we did that to find our investors, and now we have a group of fantastic people who love making movies. They love making movies with us, and so there's no more of that bullshit. If I have to finance a project now, it's like it's quick because it's proven what we do, and so that's the benefit of spending a year doing all the bullshit, is that you're going to end up with a really great relationship with a handful of people,
Yeah. So what does that pitch, once you get into that meeting or phone call, what does the pitch look like? Obviously, as you've said, just when there's no minimum guarantee on the table, this is an incredibly risky proposition. Just what does that pitch look like to these potential investors?
I would keep it as straightforward as possible, because if you're pitching people who are high net individuals, they're going to be smart people who have had success and are having success in business, whatever their business is. And most businesses are the same as far as just the internal and the financial workings and the bookkeeping and all that stuff. So it's always a red flag to me when somebody pitches me something and it's like overly complex, or you got to wire money to this bank and then it's going to give me, like, anything that doesn't make sense, I would just run away from. And I think it goes the same for if you're pitching investors. It's like people, you got to keep it simple, because smart people keep it simple. It's like an investment is a simple thing.
Yeah.
So any tricks or any, the other one that I love, which is just like this, is the matching funds. It's like people are always like, oh, if you get me 50%, I get you 50%. I have never heard of that working before. And people will call me and pitch it to me all the time.
Yeah.
They'd be like, I have 50% of the fund. I need 50% of the funds. That's not a thing. Like, it's not a fucking thing.
Yeah.
But people call me all the time with this bullshit. And then if you look into it, the matching funds thing, it all of a sudden just falls apart if you have half a brain. It's like they start telling you these weird scenarios, and business doesn't work like that. It's like, just keep it simple. You don't need a 100-page contract and like all this crazy stuff. It's like nobody wants to do business like that.
Yeah. I'm curious with this film, since you have a relationship with places like the Asylum, as you had this script done and you started to get it cast, did you go out to some of those places and try and get a minimum guarantee up front, or you just didn't want anybody to interfere? You wanted to make the movie you wanted to make, and that was that?
Yeah. I didn't go out for, I didn't look for distribution at all ahead of time. Okay. We were making our thing, and we were making our thing to go to festivals. And that was it. And so, yeah, I didn't approach anybody like that. Once the movie was done and we started getting to festivals, I would invite distributors, domestic and international, to attend the festivals to see it. But yeah, I didn't reach out I didn't want any pre-sales on this movie.
Okay, perfect. So how can people see Cold Moon? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
I do. Yeah, it's coming out on October 5th in theaters. It's going to be in 12 cities. It's going to be in your major markets: Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta, Houston. We also added it to New Orleans, and we also added it to Boston. We're constantly posting stuff on the Twitter page, which is @ColdMoonMovie. And you can also get it off mine, which is @GE Furst. That's constantly the updates. So it's coming out theatrically October 5th. I'm sorry, October 6th, which is a Friday. Okay. That following Tuesday, it's coming out on premium VOD. It's going to be on every platform you could think of: iTunes, DirecTV, all that stuff. Anything that's where you pay video on demand. In January, it's coming out on Blu-ray and DVD, and it'll be available everywhere that Blu-ray and DVDs are sold. Mm-hmm. And then in May, it's coming out on television, which is a deal that we're in the middle of now. So I'm not sure which network, but that's in May. It'll hit kind of basic cable, but I would recommend seeing it in the theater for sure. Yeah.
So, okay, well, Griff, I really appreciate this. I will get those links for your Twitter account and the Cold Moon. I will get those from you, and I'll put those in the show notes. I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk with me, and good luck with this film.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. It's good to talk to you too, man.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Just want to mention two things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters find producers who are looking for material. First, I've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit one logline per newsletter. I went and emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far, I have around 400 producers who have signed up to receive it. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in this pitch newsletter and get your script into the hands of lots of producers, sign up at sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. And secondly, I've partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads sites so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting about 5 to 10 high-quality paid screenwriting leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or are looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project that they are developing. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from production companies looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. Producers are looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots, so it's a huge array of different types of projects that these producers are looking for, and these leads are exclusive to our partner and SYS Select members. To sign up, just go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer-producer Dan DiFilippo, who recently did a remake of the Francis Ford Coppola film Dementia 13, which was sort of a cult, Roger Corman cult film from the 1960s. So we talked through that process, how he went about getting the rights to the film, how he went about writing the script, raising the money, and getting the project off the ground. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Griff. One thing that really stood out to me was his comment that raising money for a film just ultimately took a superhuman effort. And so that's it. It's just a superhuman effort. And from what I've seen from independent film, that really does sum it up. When you really dig down to like the nuts and bolts of how these films got produced, usually there's one or two people that just puts it on their back and just carries it through the finish line. When these things do come together, it usually just seems like a miracle. As a writer, I've been involved with some of these projects as a producer as well, and it just feels like a miracle when it feels like the planets are aligning and something just opens up, and then all of a sudden you raise the money or the film is moving, getting the green light and moving into production. But again, at the center of these miracles, there's usually just that one or two person who just, through sheer force of will, wanted to make it happen. And keep in mind, everyone who makes it through this process successfully, they had moments of doubt. They had moments where they felt like it was never going to happen. So if you start this process, you're going through this process and you have those feelings, those are part of the process, feeling like it's never going to end, feeling like you're not going to actually succeed. But that's the thing. The people who succeed, they pushed through those moments. They got over those moments. And that's ultimately what separated the winners from the losers. It's just that perseverance. It's putting those feelings aside when everything feels lost, when it feels hopeless. It's pushing those feelings aside and continuing forward. One other point of clarification I just want to make from something that Griff said. He mentioned having a piece of paper that was worth money and getting a loan against that. In case you don't know, what he's basically talking about there is what's called a minimum guarantee from a distributor. And basically, a distributor will look at the film before it's produced. So they'll be looking at the screenplay, they'll be looking at who's directing it, who's producing it, and mostly what they're going to look at is who is the cast, what actors are involved in this project, and namely, it's actors that have some name recognition, they're not necessarily concerned with the quality of the actors as much as just how famous they are and how much they're going to be able to help sell the movie. And then the distributor will make a determination based on their experience in the marketplace and based on what you have as far as a package, and they will try and come up with a number of what they think the film is actually worth. And then again, in the current landscape, the main thing that's going to determine that is going to be the cast. But once they have some sort of a basic understanding of what they think the film is going to worth, if they have a good relationship with the producer, they may offer you what's called a minimum guarantee, which is a contract. It's a signed contract that says the distributor promises to pay X number of dollars once the film is delivered. So as far as independent film goes, that's really what you want to get. You want to be in a position where you have relationships with distributors, you take your package before you produce the film, and you get these minimum guarantees. And again, some of it, Griff was talking about that in pre-sales. Some of that's going to involve pre-sales. You might have a distributor give you a minimum guarantee based on some of their pre-sales. I think it would be the distributor who would probably go out and make those pre-sales for you. And then once they start to see that there's some interest in the marketplace, again, that might help them decide what the minimum guarantee is for this film. But that's what you really want, because needless to say, it takes down the risk of the film. As let's just say you get a minimum guarantee, just to make the math easy, for $1 million on a film, then if you spend a little less than $1 million, you stand a real good chance of making some profit, making all your money back to pay back your investors, plus a little bit of profit. So it really decreases the risk. Now, there's always risk. I mean, distributors can go out of business. you can deliver the film and the distributor can refuse to pay. So it's not just the relationship with the producer and the distributor, but it's a two-way street. You have to know these distributors well enough to trust them that these agreements that they're signing actually will be enforceable, and that the distributor will actually be willing to stand behind it. So that's really one of the keys. And most of the film, in my experience, most of the time, when a distributor makes money from an independent, or I'm sorry, when a producer makes money from an independent film, I don't know that I've ever these films do exist, something like the Blair Witch Project. There are films, Paranormal Activity, where the producer just went out and made the film without any kind of a minimum guarantee, and then they were able to sell it and obviously make a lot of money. Those are kind of the top of the example in terms of that. But most of the people you talk to who make money from independent film, they're getting these minimum guarantees up front, because they're not going to make the film they're not going to do something as risky as just making a film without a minimum guarantee and put all of their potential investors' money at risk. In this case, it sounds like Griff, that's basically what he went and did. Now, he has a lot of experience, he has a lot of relationships, so he may have known that he can make a good quality film, and he may have the relationships where he feels confident that he still can go out and sell it. But certainly when you're early in the process, without those relationships with the distributors, it's going to be tough to make your money back on an independent film. Again, cast is going to be the single biggest issue. So two things that I want to relate back to the pinch, because I think all of this stuff hopefully sort of will you can see it actually in practice with what I'm doing with the pinch. I feel like me talking about the pinch on the podcast, hopefully that is demystifying the process a lot for the people that are listening to this. And so, if you've never been involved in film production, but you're thinking this is something you might want to pursue, hopefully just listening to these podcasts, listening to what I'm doing, it just kind of breaks it down a little bit, and you see that I'm just a guy. I'm just kind of stumbling my way through it. I've never been the main producer on a feature film either, so I'm kind of just learning as I go along in this process, and hopefully my experience will educate you enough that you maybe feel like you can go through this as well. It's still going to require the superhuman effort, but hopefully all of those sort of mysterious things that you don't know about, hopefully I can demystify some of those for you by talking about the film. But also, one of my big goals with the pinch is to be able to approach distributors with it. And even if I don't get a deal from the pinch with those distributors, hopefully it'll be enough to at least start to build a relationship with them. Maybe it won't be this film. Maybe I'll go back with a second film, and they'll start to see, well, this guy's making pretty decent films. Maybe we should try and cut some sort of a deal with him. And again, if I just start to pitch the pinch to distributors, I've got some other projects that I'm working on. I will also be able to kind of bring those up and say, hey, okay, you don't like the pinch, but what if I could present this package? Is there any chance of getting a minimum guarantee? So this is all, again, sort of a part of my own process of becoming not just a screenwriter, but a producer screenwriter. And hopefully others that listen to this podcast can kind of come along for it as well. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.